Ebola.
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 Welcome back, guys, to our podcast, Ebola! Every Wednesday night at 6:45 p.m. coming at you live. So today we got our very special, not guests because they're always here.
Hi, I'm Camille Paginto.
I'm Kinjal Patel.
I'm Pilar Rodriguez.
I'm Anna Wheelis.
So before we get started, we should probably introduce a little bit of the background about each of us. So guys, why did we register for virology this semester? What were the reasons?
So I know I'm interested in viruses from a public health perspective and also how they can possibly be used as like tools in biotech.
All right.
Cool.
I want to learn more about these infectious agents.
Sorry, guys, we're having a very funny day here at the studio. Keep it going, Kendall. Keep it going.
You got this, Kinjal.
I want to learn more about these infectious agents and how they cause diseases.
That's really cool. Like in animals?
In humans too.
Yeah, okay, so that's really cool that you mentioned that because, I think about a year ago, I took parasitology, and I was learning about all of these little tiny things that caused all of this, like, really crazy stuff, and I was just really interested about how something so tiny could cause so much chaos in the world.
Oh, really? That's very interesting, Pilar. So it was microbiology for me. So it was like that paper that we had to do about Zika viruses. So like that introduction just kind of made me interested in viruses.
Great. So now that we know why we are in this class, let's move on to the main topic of this podcast. So today we will be discussing an article published on CNN Health, which is called Herpes virus may play a role in Alzheimer's, study says. Apparently some studies found a strain of herpes virus called 6A and 7 that might contribute to the Alzheimer's disease.
Well, that's super interesting.
Yeah, so the study is talking about two specific strains of human herpes virus, 6 and 7. So
Right.
6A and 7 actually. And so they're both part of the same family as herpes simplex and varicella zoster. So that would be the herpes viridae family. They're DNA viruses. So human herpes virus 6 and 7 both can cause roseola, so a
Right.
disease that causes a sort of like a diffuse rash on the body and has sort of similar to chickenpox, kind of like that kind of illness. And all herpes viruses can establish latency in systemic infection.
Oh, systemic infection.
Alrighty. So you know what? That sounds actually very interesting, and I really wanted to learn more about the subject when Kinjal, when you presented this article to us. So I think we should explain to the audience why we chose this.
And that makes sense that the audience wants to know why we chose this article. So the prevalence of Alzheimer's has a really big impact. So the article stated that every 65 seconds somebody will develop Alzheimer's. And I mean, that in itself is super scary,
Right.
It's also the 6th leading cause of death in the United States, so it's a huge public health concern, and it's definitely a personal burden. There's no treatment, so people that have this disease, they don't really have some positive aspect to look at, and their family members too, right? So they definitely have a diminished quality of life, and those that are ailed by the disease become completely dependent on their family members.
Right.
Yeah, and a lot of research has been done on Alzheimer's, but so far there's no definitive link between any one, infectious agent or any one like metabolic process that leads to the disease. And some people actually develop the pathological signs like on a histopathology level, but then they don't end up actually having the symptoms. So it's really hard to sort of decipher what's causing Alzheimer's. And a lot of people are exposed to human herpes virus throughout their life, and so the findings of this article are really important if we can, sort of link one of the herpes viruses to the development of one of these diseases.
Yeah, Anna, you're totally right. And I think this article is definitely interesting. So when we talk about Alzheimer's and its implications, do we think that this CNN article did a good job at representing the disease and the suspect relationship of it with the said herpes virus? And by that I mean, was the author of the article able to correctly describe the study and include all the needed information?
I mean, I think it's hard to say because the author, like, they just talk about quote. They just quote previous studies, doctors, and like they
Yeah, I know what you mean. Like, they kind of get other people to do the talking for them
Right,
in this
right,
article
yeah.
a lot. Like most of the text of the latter half of this is quotes from other people and not from journalists, from scientists. And so I guess on one hand that's kind of good because it prevents them from saying anything that's technically wrong, but it also doesn't, they don't really offer a whole lot of insight into the study itself.
Yeah, so it's hard to say if it actually is accurate. Because it's still an ongoing process to this day, right? So maybe.
I mean, personally, I think that's funny because that wouldn't flow in like a school paper, just quoting everybody.
You're right. And we want to discuss more about what this article means to the scientific community. We'll get to that after this short break.
And now, a brief message from our sponsors.
Don't take the flu back to school. Reported flu virus cases have spiked in the first 2 weeks of January since 2013, and this year is no different. Get vaccinated and ensure hard surfaces and objects are disinfected with an EPA-registered disinfectant. Clorox Bleach has you and your family protected. Clorox, we make everyday life better, every day.
Alright guys, we are back. Let's get to the good stuff. What does this mean for virology? What are the implications of the findings?
So it says in the article that about 90% of adults have been exposed to the herpes virus by the age of 50, but we know that not all of them develop dementia. So this means that all of the virologists and the biochemists out there have to start studying the mechanism by which the strain of herpes interacts with our brains. So we have to figure out who is more susceptible, who is at risk. I mean, I'm not sure how many people are alarmed by this article, but I definitely know I am. I think we should worry about how many people react to these news, or if they even care at all. The world of virology is always advancing and changing, so this is just another piece to add to the puzzle.
Yeah, you're right. But this isn't all bad because, I mean, if we can find the possible connection or the details of the relationship between this strain of herpes virus and Alzheimer's, we can possibly modify the virus to help treat Alzheimer's maybe, or modify another virus to find a cure for this type of dementia. I'm just saying maybe a new antiviral or immune therapy, as the article mentioned, could be created to treat or prevent this disease, but more research is obviously necessary.
All right, so I think I want to talk a little bit more about the design of the study that the article is representing. If I'm correct, it's a case control study. So the way that it worked was that they compared brain samples from people with Alzheimer's or without Alzheimer's, and then compared, how likely they were to have been infected with human herpes virus 6A or 7. There are some benefits and some drawbacks to that type of study.
Yeah, I think, so you mentioned herpes, 6A and 7, but I don't think they even said it in the article when they said that the fact that 90% of adults had been exposed to the herpes virus by age 50, they didn't even
say
herpes
the type. Virus.
Yeah, so you can have people freaking out about being exposed to like herpes simplex virus 1 and, completely freaking out that they're going to get Alzheimer's.
Yeah, more details were necessary.
Yeah. Also, you mentioned case control studies. I think that's a really good point. So with case controls, if I remember correctly from virology, you can't add new hypotheses, right?
Yeah.
No, because the way that a cohort would work in this case is like they would find people who had human herpes virus and then follow them over time to see if they developed Alzheimer's, but that sounds immensely difficult.
Yeah, so with case control, we were less restricted by time and money and compliance, and like Kinjal said, we definitely need to do more research on it, which should be made easier by the case control.
Yeah, because it's relatively, for case controls, I think it's like it's relatively quick to initiate and conduct, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's an ongoing project,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the strain, herpes 6A, what is
so,
all that about?
Previously, Anna, when you mentioned about like the latency of the herpes virus, I gotta agree with that because I remember reading about the HHV6 strain that it like all herpes viruses, it it's latent and then it
Mhm.
reactivates again. But specifically for the 6A strain, it reactivates in the brain tissue, which can then lead to what is it called, like the dysfunction.
Neurodegeneration.
Well, it has to be some kind of
Yeah, something like
neurodegeneration.
with like the brain.
So
which,
we're saying that they're saying that this virus bypasses the host immune system in the nervous tissue, right? Like this has to be the mechanism.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and the article brings up something kind of interesting, that maybe the development of amyloidosis or Alzheimer's, the amyloid plaques in the brain,
Mhm.
might be an innate immune response that has been sort of relatively undiscovered in response to central nervous system infections.
So when we say innate immune responses, we're including like physical barriers.
Yeah,
Right? Okay.
those ones. Yeah.
Okay.
So things that don't require like adaptive immunity, like
Right,
B
so,
and
like-
T cell response.
Like
Yeah.
phagocytes and neutrophils,
Mhm.
macrophages, NK cells.
Yes.
Cool, and we did talk about all of that in virology, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
Yeah. Okay, well, I mean, I think this article was really cool. What about you guys?
Yeah, it really was.
yeah, I just feel like it should definitely have more
Yes.
research to come.
Yeah, I mean,
and-
like the length of the article itself was like
it
pretty
was relatively short, right?
for like such
Yeah.
a large study that made such big like conclusions. So
I'm not sure it's the best example of science journalism that I've ever seen. but,
Probably.
Yeah.
yeah, I
With a
think
lot of quotes.
it did
Right.
like avoid blatant sensationalism.
Mhm.
Made some effort to not
So it's
be that way.
important to note that these findings reported in the study are not sufficient to demonstrate that herpes virus causes or like helps develop Alzheimer's. More research is definitely necessary.
yeah, we don't want you guys to like go out there and just like put
Yes.
yourselves in a bubble,
Right.
you know, being exposed to herpes and then getting dementia. Like that's not what the article's trying to say at all. Just giving us some facts that they found. But yeah, I agree with you. It's like more research is definitely needed.
Yeah. Alrighty, guys. I think that's a wrap for tonight. Make sure to subscribe. Find us on the Apple Podcast every Wednesday. And anything else to add, guys, before we close out?
I mean, I just want to give a big shout out to Dr. Ronk of the semester.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So see you next week, Wednesday at 6:45 p.m. to Ebola.
Bye, guys.